Welcome to the fastest daf in town, Tana Masaktas Bava Metzia, Daf Samech Ches. We are going to begin on Samech Ches Amud Aleph, the fourth line from the top. Rav Ashi. So Rav Ashi says as follows: the Amruli Sabe de Mas Machasya, that it was sent to me by the elders of the city Machasya, that Stam Mashkanta Shaita, that when it comes to a Mashkanta, which we learned in yesterday's daf, has to do with the borrower who gives as collateral, as a pledge for a loan, his property. And we said it was questionable exactly what control that Malva has over this property during the time of the loan, and whether he could eat the peros and the like. So when it comes to a mashkanta, it's a year. So typically we're dealing with this amount of time. So my nafkamina, what difference does it make? So the i'achol shata, if he was eating it for the fruits for a year, matz masalikle, then he's able to deal with it in this fashion. V'ilo matz masalikle. So what does that mean? So says Rashi, after a year he cannot be masalik. Says Rashi, kol shenasai, all of the years, v'afilu ba'ater de masalke. Even if we're dealing with a situation in a place where the amount of money the lova could pay it off, the question is, again, therefore, if the lova can pay it off, so therefore the malva really doesn't have exclusive rights on this. So the din is that they have a year to be able to pay it off. Afterwards, he can't. The Omer Avashi, Omerli Sabed Mas Machasya, they also said, my mashkanta. He explained, what exactly is this word? What does this mean? Mashkanta. So he says, it comes from the shchuna gabe. It's referring to, it's like you are a neighbor. That there's no neighbor that's closer to you. So what does that mean? So we know by the din of a bar metzra that you have to give first rights to your neighbor when you want to sell property. So if the borrower wishes to sell the property, so the lender has first rights because he's like the closest neighbor, says Rashi. Ein shachin kar mimenu, his own closer. V'im ba halayva marcha ein babal mitzareha shachin toiv liknoisa kazeh. There's no other neighbor like him. So therefore the malva has first rights to buy this land. Omer Rava, leis hilchasa, the halacha is not lo kitarshe papunoi, not like the tarshi papunoi, velo kishtare mechuzoi. So we're going to understand who these are, and also velo kechachire narshoi. Okay, so we have to understand what are these things. So the halacha is not kitarshi pupunoi. So what is that referring to? Kit Rashay the Rav Papa. What is this? It says Rashi that we saw previously that Shechiri will posit. So according to him, when it came to the his beer, that basically what he did was he gave him beer, and he made him pay for it back for a higher price later on. And his Papa's logic was, it's not ribis because my beer doesn't spoil and I'm wealthy, I don't need to sell it now, so I could have held it on for a more expensive period of time. So that is the Tarshe de Rav Papa. Fine. So, and we said, so how is this, why are we soimich on you? Maybe you're still causing them a loss. So Rav Papa, who was a chacham, a talmid chacham, he didn't have to pay taxes, and therefore they also benefited from it. Shtari mechuznoi, the zakvile l'ravcha akarna, v'kasvile b'shtara. So mi yemer de havi ravcha. So what happened is, in this group of people, Rav Papa of the Shtar Mechuznoi, they invested money with merchants. So they gave money with merchants, and they included their share of the expected profit in the loan document itself, guaranteeing that they were going to have profit. But who says that still is going to be a profit? So we end up saying it's a problem of ribis where there's guaranteed, but if there's a potential loss, then we say it's not an issue. However, here, because it's guaranteed in the document that you're expecting to receive the profit of the loan, so it's an issue of ribis. Armle marbar amemlor avashi abba abedhachi. This abba he did such a thing. When it came in front of us, we actually said it was trustworthy. We believed it. Fine. I can understand that for him himself, so this person did it, so you can trust him because he's alive and he can testify to this extent. However, what happens if afterwards he dies? V'nafel shtar kamei yasmi, mine. So in that case, what happens if the man dies and all of his children aren't aware of this stipulation, so they're going to end up collecting improperly? The problem is the fact they said ish shachiv, so it's havi kishkagish yaitzim lifnei hashalit. We have to be careful what we say, because by saying things, as Marbar Amemar said to Rav Ashi, that what if you die? So if you start speaking that way, it's almost like it's a prophecy. V'nach nashi da Amemar, and Amemar ended up dying shortly thereafter. Chachirei Narshoi, halach is not like them either. To kasvi hachi, this is what they write. They wrote mashkin le planya are le planya, that base of a hadar chachramine. So the lova would pledge his property to the malva, which is what we talked about. So technically, it's like the malva gets it as holding on as collateral. And however, instead of it being given over to the malva, the land is leased back to the lova. So therefore, it's like the lova's property was never really left as rishus. So it's this interesting dynamic of giving over your property as a pledge, but then basically never letting go of it. Says Rashi, Shahayu Bali Batim Alavin Mois Lenium, that they would, the Chachirein or Shoy, they would lend money to the poor. Also, they say him for their fields. So basically, again, poor people had fields. They lent them money, and they would technically take their fields. But then they would give back their fields, the poor people their field, and it would be leased back to them. So they would actually have to be paying for these fields. So Amos kana de aknia nihile. So he says, like, when were you koined? The malva was never koined this field in order to be able to do this, and therefore it turns out it's considered to be ribas katsutza. He didn't do any tircha, he didn't do anything, so therefore it's considered ribas katsutza. Amos kana de akni nihile. However, in the kakasi hachi, nowadays we write something. We say kanina mine, that I'll be kind of this field from you, v'shahina kama idane, and we will delay and wait for a certain amount of time in the hands of the malva, v'hader chachra, and then only later on I'll lease it to you. Kidei shalatino nelos mifnei lavin. So Shapardami, we do this in order to be able to allow more loans. Otherwise, people are not going to lend. So therefore, they allow the land to be, so to speak, taken through a kinyan to the malva, and he waits a little bit. So now it's like in his rishus. And then we allow him to turn around and to lease it to this loiva. But this is actually not true. That even if you delayed, it's still aser. As Rashi says, there feels shahayanami aser the ribas gemura he. It's still ribas. She'en kan safik ka'isav oichel shapamim. So again, in this situation, it's considered to be an actual form of ribas. This is question 13. Rabbi Leis hilchsa kechire narshoi. Mahu chachire narsho. As we said, Shai Malvin Mois Lanim, they would lend money to the poor, Al Sedesayim, for their fields. So they would take their fields as like a mashkain, as mashkata. V'chayzrim, they would turn around, umachirim moisam, and they would end up leasing their own fields back to them, but kach v'kach for a certain amount of kurim l'shana. Okay. Vait. It says next masnis. Ein moishivin chenveni l'machsis schar. So this has to do with the din of iska, and Rashi quotes over here the Tam Nemos Mishum Darmino Kaman. We're going to see on Daf Kuf Dalid the Hach Iska, that when it comes to a merchant who sells someone else's stuff, the way it works is that you give your items to a merchant, and he sells it and he ends up keeping half of the profits. So he gets your item, your widgets, whatever it may be, and they sell them and keep half the profits. And therefore, because that while they're holding on to this item, so because half of the monies they keep and half they have to give back to you, Rashi says palga milva upalga pikadin. It's like half of it is a milva. That's an element of a loan, because he's giving you something and you have to give him half back. The other part is a pikadin. Stam hamakabel pragmatia l'machsis schar makabelov. Achrayas chatzei keren ba'insin v'zula. Okay. Hilkach. So anyway, the point is that when we're dealing with this half, right? So half of the loan, even half of the loan, half of the deposit. So part of the loan becomes the issue of ribis, because we're talking about a loan, and therefore, because of that, you can't give over merchandise in order for the merchant to be able to keep half of it, because half of it is considered to be like a loan. And you can't give him money to take fruits. Again, to keep half of it, because that again is like you're lending him money, and then you're getting more back. It's only allowed if you pay him like a worker. We'll see what that means. So in that situation, it will be allowed. So if you pay like a fair wage, so then that no longer constitutes like a loan. Ein moshivin tarnagoylin, you can't supply chickens, l'mechsa, again, for him to be able to keep half. Ve'ein shamin agolim siyachim, and also, for that matter, you can't supply small animals, like horses, calves, l'mechsa, el im kenaisan lo sachar amaloi umazoino, unless you give them you pay him for the wages of his work and for their food. You could give them these animals which were not assessed, and allow them to grow by them. When it comes to a donkey, until it's old enough that it can bear a burden. Says Rashi, as again, if they haven't been assessed, if it dies, you want to collect it, pay anything. However, if it lives, then you'll be able to split the profits. So you're basically raising this animal. If it dies, don't worry about it. So you're not going to absorb a loss. But if you do make money, it'll be split. She said you could do this until the animal grows a third of its growth, or for a donkey until it's old enough to be able to hold whatever packages. Says the Gemara, Tana kipoil batel. So our Mishnah, when it says you're allowed to do this, is you have to pay him like a poil batel. Mashma says, Rashi, kama adam roitza litol v'leishia batel. How much a person would want to be able to basically sit and do nothing. So my kapoil batel, what exactly is that referring to? As we continue to Samach Chesed Beis, Rabbi, kipoil batel shel oisem malacha the batamina, referring this particular job that he doesn't have to do. Says Rashi, Im haya nagar or napoch, let's say he was a carpenter or a blacksmith. Kama adam roitzelito, how much would a person take? We bought them a malacha, kveda kazu, lasos malacha kal. Instead of doing a hard job, to do an easy job. So that amount he would take, that difference between doing a harder job or an easy job, that is how much you have to pay him. Okay. Utsricha. So says the Gemara, why does the Mishnah mention all these cases? So have you mentioned regarding a store, a merchant, we can think that just as long as we're dealing with paying him like a poil bottle, Yishalom doing nafesh tirche, is not engaged in great levels of work. Of Omois, when it comes to giving him money, Likach behen Paris, and now all of a sudden he has to take the money and buy fruit with it. The nafesh tirche is a lot more trouble involved. Maybe a poil bottle is not enough because he's actually doing a harder job. Paris, money to buy fruit. Maybe that's why you're required even to do that much, because there's tircha. A merchant doing nafesh tircha doesn't do much. Even the smallest amount. If you will tavel imay ela but batzer v'achimo ela greigris achas zeo schar tzricha. Even if all you're dipping in a small amount of fish into a fish brine, or eating a small fig or the light a dry fig, and that should also be enough tzricha. Okay. Kama is evatanagamal and simon. Tanaman kama hu sacharei ben meruba ben muet. So how much is the schar? So the difference between, as we said, schar batal between meruba ben muet. The difference between doing, says Rashi. There's no Rashi. Between a lot and a little. Rabbi Huda Omer filu tavli mo el batzer v'loyachli mo el gregris achas zeo scharo. So this actually, he holds even the smallest amount. And Shimon Yoicha Yarmin Noislo Skar Mishalim. You actually have to pay him the full amount, like a poil bottle, not the difference. Tanaban. Ein shaman loas iziv loas arachelim v'loy kol davar shenu oisav oichel l'mechsa. So a person is not allowed, as basically the language of the Mishnah, that this person cannot give over these animals and to supply these animals, goats, sheep, anything that doesn't do anything. In other words, it doesn't work and it eats. L'mechsa. Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda Eimer Shaman Asa Izim Imnei Shechol Vais. It's not true. Even though they don't work, but nonetheless they do produce something. It produces milk. When it comes to sheep, you can take its wool, and v'shaitfos, says Rashi, kishayrim b'nahar hamayim, when it passes a river of water, shaitvin min agiza v'unatla. So you're able to take it that way. That's an tarnagom in Mishihoisav. So it does she oisav that it does and it eats. Okay. So Matanakama, Giza b'chalav lo sipek l'schar moai umazoinai. So he says when it comes to the milk and the shearing, that's not enough compared to the schar of his work or his mezainis. But Giza b'chalav kol yam mula plegi. The truth is, when it comes to Giza and chalav, no one argues. Says Rashi, "V'tanakam giz v'chalav lo sipik b'schar mol mazayin bidmia v'chi giza she'achel v'chalav yizim ina masapik l'schar mol mazayin." So actually, Pumfakir, it says it's actually a kasha. According to the Tanakama, so l'chayra that certainly should be enough. That should be suffice. So he says you're right. When it comes to giza v'chalav kol yamul plegi, because again it certainly is equivalent to that which it eats. Ki plegi bin natsyuve v'toisri. The question is, when it comes to Says Rashi, "Begiz v'chol v'chol pligi im neo yispal habehema shaloi lacha behem." However, when it comes to Nesyovi, which is the whey, which is the mei psos achol, like the leftover of milk, the saisrei, and maybe just a little bit of wool. Tanakama savar lo krem shimon ben yoichai. Diyaminas lo schar mishalom. You have to pay the full amount. Rabbi Yosef ben Yehuda savar lo kavua. He'll take his father diyam rafilu tavli moel matzev lo yochai moel gragris achas, smallest amount. Zehu schar. Okay. Tan Rabban. So maskeris ishel chaverta. A woman could rent out a tarnagolis b'shnei afroichim for two chicks. Isha she'amru chaverta, a woman that said to her friend, tarnagolis shali, the tarnagolis is mine, ubeitzim shalichi, and the eggs will be yours. V'ani ve'at nachleik be'afroichim, and we'll divide up the chicks. Rabbi Yehuda mater Rabbi Shimon oiser. Rabbi Yehuda lo boy sachar maloi. Rabbi Yehuda, who is mater, he doesn't require the reward for the work or for the mezainis. Ika beitzim, muzaros, because there are the spoiled eggs that will not hatch. Says Rashi, shenin koltos afroyach v'natlaso b'schara, so she'll be able to get that for her wages. Ve'hein mutaris bachil, they're allowed to be eaten. Tanuban, makom shnagul haloi sachar kataf l'mois v'heimom malin. So in a place in which a person is compensated for putting the animal on their shoulders, the ein mashanin miminhag medina. The din is we're not going to deviate from the minhag. Says Rashi, makom shenagu shahasham agom siyachim katanim lemechsa, that we allow this for the merchants to be able to get half. Lechavero noisel mois b'schar shemoitzian umachnisen al ksefo malin. And again, it's called that we evaluate the ego with its mother. Usayach im imo as well, the sayach, the horse, the foal. Yafil b'machash nagul aloi sachar katav amois. Rashimigo loy boy sachar malo mazaini. Ika galol. She says there's the dung. The idach galol mafkuri mafkuru. The other one says that's where it's completely it's hefker. Okay. Let's look at some questions. Question 14. So we said that a merchant who, again, is the issue of ribis, who sells someone else's stuff, so he gets half of the profits, half of it's considered to be a loan, it's like ribis. Unless, the Mishnah said, it's okay if he's noislo k'schar kapoyel. So, mahu sachara, what exactly is this compensation that this person is receiving? What are we talking about? So Rameir says kamashi kibul of ben meruba ben muat, whatever he accepts, whether it's a lot or a little. Rabbi Yehuda says even if all you did was again dip the small amount, like of brine or food, or like fish or these figs, shalobatar sachar zeu scharo. Rav Shimon kapoyel bottle. You pay him like a poil bottle, which is the same as question TB 25. Okay, TB 25, which says over here, so kamahu scharo echa muad echa maruba feel gargas achas schar shalom. Okay. Fine. Question TA 24. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel oimer shavan egel in imoy. Madua insach laloi so schar amol mazaynai. Why don't you have to pay for the work or for the mazaynas? Madua tanakama pligi Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. So he says the ika glolim. Tanakama saver glolim afkori mafkuhu. So this is, as we just said over here, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel lo boy schar amol mazaynai because ika glolim. That was TA 24. Okay, let's just see a couple more lines. Rav Nachman, halacha Rabbi Yehuda, halacha Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda, halacha Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. So the Rashi says halacha Rabbi Yehuda, betovel imo botzer. Halachas Rabbi Yosef Rabbi Yehuda ben Siuve v'Saisri. That it's with regard to the whey and a little bit of wool. Okay. B'nei Rav Elish, the children of Rav Elish, Nafek Elihu Hahushtar. There was a document that Havikasabe Palga Ba'agar Palga Behefsid, that half will be profit. They'll share half of the profits and half of the losses. Rav Elish Gavarabahu. He's a great person. He's surul inish linshi lehavi. He's not going to have done iser. Safi manavshach. Ipalgam agar. If he shares its profit equally, trade tilti behefsid, then the investor will take 2/3 of the loss. As we continue to samach this manal. Ipalgam behefsid. If they divide and equally the loss, trade tilti beagar, then the investor will take 2/3 of the gain. Amrav Kahana Amrisal Shemaisa Committee Rav Zvid Benardo said this sugya. The Amrli Dilma Rav Elish Toivel Imo Botzer Havi. The Amrav Nachman Halacha Rabbi Huda Amrli Lav Hilchasa Itmar. The halacha El Shita Itmar. Not that's the halacha, but Shita. Says Rashi Amrav Nachman. Kul b'Shita Achas Samar Devrayim. Basically, they're all saying the same thing. Hachinam mistar, but ilu tema hachi lamuli machshav lamemer halacha lema halacha Rabbi Yehuda demeko b'kulhu. You should just say the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, who is the most lenient. Ad kan.